Did you know that about 40% of us will be diagnosed with cancer at some point in our lives? A lot of that comes down to bad genetics and just plain bad luck. But here's the good news. Up to 40% of all cancers are actually preventable. You can't change your genetics, but you can absolutely influence how your genes behave. And one of the most powerful ways to do that and lower your cancer risk is through the food you eat every single day. You see, many cancers aren't just a genetic disease. They're also a metabolic disease and an immune function disease. The wrong foods, even ones we think are normal or healthy, can quietly create the perfect conditions for cancer to grow and spread. If you're someone who cares about your health and wants real facts instead of marketing hype, hit that subscribe button right now. Subscribing costs you nothing, but it helps us keep bringing you content that some industries might not want you to see. In this video, I'm going to break down the science behind how certain foods can literally feed cancer cells. On this channel, I cover the most up-to-date, evidence-based information on weight loss, metabolic health, and longevity. So let's get into it. First, let's set the foundation. Cancer starts when a normal cell becomes abnormal. It just takes a single mutation, which happens all the time. If this mutation isn't repaired or caught, in some cases, it can lead to uncontrolled cell growth. But for that mutated cell to survive and spread, it needs a few things to fall into place. First, cancer cells need glucose as their primary energy source. Second, they need hormones like insulin and IGF-1 to grow. These are basically signals that activate growth pathways. Third, cancer cells require inflammation, which breaks down barriers and suppresses our immune system, our first line of defense. And finally, cancers need a blood supply, which they get through a process called angiogenesis. This process creates new blood vessels, like a lifeline, to feed the cancer cells all the nutrients they need to grow. Unfortunately, many foods in our modern diet directly support every single one of these steps. But the good news is, we can use this knowledge to our advantage. We can use food to either feed cancer or to fight it. We have to start with one of the most potent, naturally occurring carcinogens ever known, aflatoxins. This is a toxin produced by certain molds that we can encounter on grains, nuts, or corn. The foods we really need to be careful with are peanuts and tree nuts like almonds, walnuts, or pistachios. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying you should avoid these foods. There's nothing wrong with nuts themselves. But we have to be careful to avoid buying nuts or grains from humid and warm countries where they're prone to mold contamination. We also have to watch out for indirect exposure from things like peanut butter or almond butter. These can be made from nuts that didn't go through a thorough mold inspection. So to minimize this risk, look for brands that source their nuts from less humid places. If you eat whole nuts, inspect them carefully. Avoid any that are discolored or shriveled, as that could be a sign of mold. Try to eat nuts within a month of buying them, and always check the expiration date. Roasting peanuts and pistachios can also help reduce the amount of aflatoxin, but it doesn't eliminate it completely. And by the way, another sneaky way aflatoxins can get into our food is indirectly through milk and dairy products. Some animals are fed aflatoxin-contaminated feed, like corn. A special aflatoxin called M1 can live on this feed and then get secreted in the animal's milk. So be careful, especially if you get milk from cows fed untested grain, or if you consume unregulated raw milk or dairy. Okay, next up. This will be no surprise, but foods high in sugar or processed carbohydrates are also linked to an increased cancer risk, especially breast, colon, and possibly pancreatic cancer. And that's because cancer cells absolutely love sugar. To help you visualize this, imagine your body is made of trillions of tiny engines, your cells. Normally, these engines burn fuel very efficiently, using oxygen to get a lot of energy from each bite of food. But cancer cells? They're different. They're more like broken, inefficient engines. They burn through a ton of fuel really, really fast. And their favorite fuel is sugar, or more precisely, glucose, the type of sugar your body makes from foods like bread, pasta, candy, and soda. This is partly explained by the Warburg effect, a process where cancer cells choose to burn sugar super quickly, even when there's plenty of oxygen around. Cancer cells don't care about efficiency. They just want to grow fast. When you eat foods that spike your blood sugar, your body releases hormones like insulin and IGF-1. Normally, this is a good thing. But in excess, these hormones send a message to your cells saying, hey, it's time to grow bigger and divide, so now you have a double whammy. You're feeding your body the preferred food of cancer cells, and the sugar itself is increasing the signals that tell those cancer cells to grow and divide even faster. We see this especially in breast cancer, where some studies show cancer cells can have 6 times more insulin receptors than healthy cells. And if that wasn't bad enough, excess sugar leads to chronic inflammation. This can cause even more DNA damage, making it easier for cancers to appear. This inflammation also weakens your immune system. We often think of our immune system as just fighting infections, but it's actually our first line of defense against cancer. The bottom line is, cancer cells are incredibly sugar hungry, but we can use this to our advantage. We can choose foods that stop feeding cancer. Instead, we can prioritize foods that feed the rest of our body while starving cancer cells. It's best to limit sugar as much as you can, with the worst offenders being processed or high glycemic carbohydrates. Instead, we need to emphasize low glycemic carbs that are high in fiber, like beans, whole grains, vegetables, and berries. Let's talk about some simple food swaps that could lower your cancer risk. One of the easiest changes? Cut out regular soda. This is low-hanging fruit. You can switch today to things like tea, water, or even diet soda. I know, there's a lot of debate around diet drinks and artificial sweeteners, and their links to cancer. It's a really nuanced topic, and I'm planning to do a deep dive on that in a future video, so stay tuned. Next up, we need to talk about processed meat and red meat. We have to be careful here, because the science isn't as black and white as the headlines suggest. There are tons of studies showing a link between high intake of processed meats like ham, bacon, sausages, and hot dogs or red meats like pork, beef, and lamb, and a higher risk of cancer, especially colorectal cancer. But here's the key, these are mostly observational studies. They show an association, not necessarily causation. Researchers look at what people eat and then track who gets cancer. They notice that people who eat more processed or red meat are more likely to develop colon cancer. But it's hard to know if those same people also smoked more or exercised less. On the flip side, did the people who ate less meat have better access to fresh foods or better healthcare? This is what we call the healthy user bias. It's possible that other healthy behaviors, not just the lower meat consumption, explain the reduced cancer risk. So, how do I think about it? Well, there are plausible reasons why red or processed meat might be a problem. Many processed meats contain nitrites, which are preservatives. In your stomach, these can turn into nitrosamines, which are known carcinogens that could increase the risk of stomach cancer. Also, how we cook meat matters. Grilling, frying, or barbecuing at high temperatures can create chemicals called HCAs and PAs. In animal studies, these compounds have been shown to damage DNA and promote cancer cells. So how do we put it all together? The correlation is definitely there, but the evidence isn't perfect. I'm not entirely convinced it's the red meat itself that's the main villain. It might be what you're not eating when you eat a lot of red meat. If you're filling up on steak and sausages, you're probably eating less fiber-rich foods like fruits, vegetables, beans, and whole grains. And we have solid research showing that a high-fiber diet is linked to a lower risk of several cancers and a 13% reduction in cancer mortality. So you probably don't need to give up red meat or grilled meat entirely, but don't overdo it. And make sure to load up on fiber with every single meal. Now, let's talk about something with much stronger evidence: alcohol. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classified alcohol as a top-tier carcinogen back in 1987. There's sufficient evidence it can cause cancer of the mouth, throat, esophagus, and liver, and it's also linked to breast and colorectal cancer. Alcohol can lead to cancer in several ways. Your body metabolizes it into a toxic compound that directly damages your DNA and messes with its ability to repair itself. Alcohol also leads to vitamin deficiencies, like B1, which is critical for your energy metabolism. It can also impair your body's ability to absorb folate, and a folate deficiency can lead to even more errors in your DNA. On top of all that, alcohol acts as a solvent, making it easier for other carcinogens, like those from tobacco, to get into your tissues. This wasn't a complete list of every food linked to cancer, of course. If there's one I missed that you're curious about, let me know in the comments below, and I'll try to cover it in a future video. I hope this was helpful. Stay healthy, and I'll see you in the next one.